Hi there, I'm Kevin Conrad, CEO of the Retirement Planning Group. We are the dedicated fee-only 100% fiduciary firm that falls under the Cetera umbrella of companies. And today I've got my good buddy Tom Sboto, who is part of the corporate development team here at Cetera. Part of, or you run the whole thing? Which one is it?
There's no way I can run the whole thing. There's a great team of people, but you're right. I'm a managing director in the corporate development M&A department, and that's all that I do.
Well, you're the perfect guy to have joining us. We're starting this podcast called Inflection Point. And the reason you and I wanted to go start this was because I, like a lot of our listeners, I'm imagining, started from zero and built a firm out of not quite a phone book, but felt like it, and cold calling. And I'm not a professional M&A guy, okay? But I have done a number of acquisitions and reviewed a lot of different opportunities that have come our way. And I wanted, we both sat down and said, we want to demystify for advisors out there, what does the succession process look like? What does an exit planning process look like? And I'm really excited to be able to hone in on that so advisors can understand what happens to their clients, what's going to happen to their team, what's going to happen, and what's going to happen to the monetization of their life's work. And with that, Tom, if you don't mind, why don't you share a little bit about your experience in the world of M&A, since you've been doing it just maybe a year, 1 or 2 years longer than me?
I wish it was a year. So no, I'm so excited to be here because I think we have so much to share, and I think that I always enjoy sharing my knowledge to anyone who wants to hear about succession planning, selling their business, right? Exit strategy, all those thoughts that come into anyone who's a business owner thinks about that, right? Timing is always the issue, but if you own a business and you don't think about that, something's wrong, in my opinion, right? Or you're not being honest with yourself. So Kevin, I've been doing this for 40 years now in this industry, and I've helped acquire firms that are large scale, medium, small, RIAs, right, which is some of our audience probably listening today are RIAs that are thinking about some sort of exit strategy. Those who are at that point in life where they should be thinking about an exit strategy. They've promised to put their clients into good hands, right? If they don't have a succession plan, they should, because things change very quickly today. Your health becomes a very important issue in this process of owning a business, because if something happens, your clients are left in a lurch. So getting a succession plan in place, finding the right buyer that can do right by your clients, right by your employees is extremely important if you're a business owner.
You hit on some great points there, and I know that your experiences are going to be able to help bring some of these issues to life as we're building out the Inflection Point podcast. Over the last year alone, so the Retirement Planning Group has been around for 20 years. And, before we became part of the Cetera, under the Cetera umbrella, we were managing around $1.5 billion, $1.7 billion probably. And since then, we've done $800 million worth of acquisitions. And with your help, over the last year specifically, we looked at how many firms do you think we probably engaged with? Yeah, probably 125 plus, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Initial conversations, all the way down to really deep conversations. And over that time period, I think we maybe made offers out of that 125, maybe made 15 offers. And over the course of the firm, we bought roughly 9 businesses. So we've seen, we've had this incredible backstage pass to see what's going on inside these firms where they weren't fits and why they weren't fits, and how we can take that information and pay it forward to the advisors that are listening to this, because they can learn from that and those mistakes we've seen other advisors make, and they can help improve the valuations of their company. And we're going to expand on this in great detail as we blow this podcast out with guest speakers, which we'll touch on towards the end.
Sure. Well, so Kevin, what you just described is absolutely music to my ears, right? I've been doing this for 40 years, and I've been helping large firms find their exit and small medium-sized firms. And I could tell you that two things: you either have to be ready or you have to be prepared to be ready, right? Because as we know from experiencing COVID, life changes very quickly, right? And a lot of people who thought, I'm going to last forever, those who thought I would never retire, right? Things change in life. So if you're ready, then that's great, right? You've already started the process. If you're not ready, you should prepare yourself to be ready, because you just don't know. I hope I live forever, but I know I'm not going to live forever, right? So being prepared is also part of the process. And why not start earlier than waiting till the last minute, when if it's at the last minute, it's not favorable to you. You're taking too much out of your daily life to try to cram in a potential exit at the wrong time when you don't have enough preparation.
100%. You know, we talked to a lot of advisors out there, and you know, a lot of the things that we're seeing out there when it comes to succession opportunities or what their plans are, and we're going to touch on one of these heavily today, but there's really 4 areas that seems to be the case. The first one is attempting to sell to what we would call a second generation advisor in the office. So they bring in somebody that's going to take over, and we'll spend more time on talking about that today. But the other handful of areas are, you know, a lot of them will think about merging with a local firm. We'll cover that more in the next episode. They'll consider a large national big box RIA to fold up under and into. Again, we'll cover that in likely the next episode, a later episode. And then last but not least, and this is the big one we see, procrastination. Is while you can't call it a succession strategy, it seems to be the one that a lot of people do, implore. So with that, let's spend a little bit of time talking about second generation advisors, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So Kevin, why do you think that a lot of advisors are considering selling to a second generation advisor? I know I have my thoughts about this, right? They spend a lot of time coaching, training someone, hoping that they could be the successor of that business, put a lot of time into it. But in my experience, a lot of times when they get to that final moment, they realize that second gen is not the person who can run a business. That second gen maybe cannot come up with the financing to buy them out. So that then puts a strain on that timeline that they had already imagined, thinking that, hey, I promised my wife or my husband I would retire at a certain point. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know, we at the Retirement Planning Group, we started down that path. We would have conversations. It typically go like this. We would need help. We would bring a younger advisor into the office to help us out. In the back of our heads, we had this idea that, you know, if something happened to me, this man or woman could probably run with it. Okay. And when we were having those conversations early on, it was come into the office, I'll give you some clients, you can harvest your own, build your own book. But that was kind of our backup plan, right? And to your point, some things became a little more obvious. They were really good advisors. I mean, really, really good advisors, probably better than I was.
Yeah.
Okay. But like a P&L and a balance sheet and all the intricacies of running a firm, all the things that weigh down on the man or woman that started the firm, that's not necessarily the cloth that the junior advisor coming in is cut from. And so they're not necessarily a good candidate to take over. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're perfect for the fit. But what I also see is on those early conversations, Tom, no one's really laying out expectations. You know, the junior advisor might say, well, hey, am I going to get a cut? You know, or can I have ownership in the business? And it's kind of like, well, you know, we'll approach that down the road. And what I've seen happen, and you know, some of the firms that we've talked to about acquisition, they've had a junior advisor. I know if you might remember, it was on the eastern half of the United States. I'll be that broad with it. It was a gentleman who'd been running a firm for a long time. He brought in 2 advisors. They seemed like they were going to be the perfect fit to take over the business. And then one of them had a health concern and he left. So now the founder has the one advisor left and hits a bit of a panic button because now he's worried if this advisor leaves. Okay. And I think sometimes the thing that's lost on a founding advisor at the firm, the longer someone is working at that firm in a junior capacity, the more sweat equity they've been putting in over the years.
And there's an expectation.
There's a the advisor starts to feel a little bit, the founding advisor feels a little beholden to, okay, I owe it to this guy, or gal, even if this isn't the right perfect fit, I kind of owe it to them. The other part of this is that advisor, junior advisor, second generation advisor is starting to think, I put a lot of time in here. I'm going to expect some level of discount when I buy the firm.
Right. Because
all the time I put in here to help grow it. I've helped double this firm since I've been here. And that becomes an expensive proposition to the founder.
Well, that starts the strain on the relationship, right? It's like a marriage at some point where someone says, but I think I've done more, right?
Yeah.
And so that creates the strain on the partnership right there. And of course, then the seller is thinking, well, gee, I built this, right? It's been on my sweat equity.
I started it.
My capital has been at risk, and I don't want to just simply give it away. And then I have to think about, if I'm the seller, do I have to carry the note on this, and for how long, right? So now, if I'm in my late 60s or early 70s, I would be thinking, I don't want to carry a note on this business that long, right? I want to be monetized now, because now's my time to take my wife and family, or my husband and family, and go out and do great things, not still have this worry over my shoulder of what happens if this second gen doesn't do the right thing with the business.
Yeah, and so a lot of the second gen, their hearts are in the right spot and they want to take it over, okay? But you got this tug of war from the founding advisor is looking at, okay, well, here's what this is worth. This is worth more now than I actually thought it would be worth when I first brought the second generation advisor in, because the value's gone up. Okay, I've grown, the market's
and by
dictating.
The way, I remember that case you were talking about. I think it was 4 times that seller had gotten to the table with someone where at the last minute the second gen actually said, I don't like it.
Yes, I don't want to go to this.
I don't feel like I want to go with this buyer. So now the seller is back to square one, right? Which becomes very frustrating. Unfortunately, because now they're starting all over again with a potential new buyer who is knowing that I have to keep that second gen person happy. Otherwise, I'm at risk.
Yep. It gets tricky. Well, so even if you want to sell to the second generation advisor, there's a tricky part that's not even been addressed yet. The value's gone up considerably. Let's just say you can come to terms. When you first sat down with them and said, come on over, I'll give you some clients and you can build a book here and you can help out. No terms are typically talked about at that point. No one wants to get into that. I know I certainly didn't want to. We'll deal with that on another date and time, okay? And then that date and time shows up. And so let's say you do come to terms, and it's a lot more than what they were originally thinking it was going to be when they started, or they had no concept of what it was worth when they started. They have to go home. That Generation 2 advisor, if they're married, they have to go home to their spouse and say, the founding owner wants to sell me the business. Great news. Bad news. I'm going to have to go in debt $2, $3, $4 million to buy this practice. And now we got to get somebody else on board. Okay. And that goes back to that original point you made at the very beginning. Is that advisor cut from the same cloth as the founding owner that started at zero with a phone book and started cold calling to build the practice?
And immediately the pressure builds, right? Because immediately if that second gen is the buyer, they're now thinking, wow, I'm taking on all this new responsibility, not only financially, right, but infrastructure, operation, running the business, dealing with the SEC or the state or your whatever regulation that you're part of. And now they're saying immediately, wow, I have to actually go out and spend money on trying to keep this business going.
After I just took all this debt on.
Right, because I enjoyed being a client-facing advisor, and now I can't really deal face-to-face with the client when I have a business to run. So it changes immediately and puts the pressure on.
Big time. And
it's not to say that it's not a good opportunity.
Well, so I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because I think if I could give some advice to those listening, where does it work? Where have we seen it work? And that is when the initial conversations are had about bringing on a junior advisor, clearly defining the roles, clearly defining the time frame, and clearly defining the exit expectations of what it's going to look like. So the roles, what are you going to do? How are you going to teach me as a junior advisor into the business of how to run and own a business? Okay, so that's, the owner has to take on that responsibility. What is the timeline for the owner? Okay, if you set an established timeline that I'm going to exit in 5 years, then you got to kind of live into that, because if you keep dragging that date out, that can become a friction point for the second generation advisor. And then last but not least, what are those terms going to look like? Are you as an owner of the firm, the founder, going to carry back a part, as you said, that advisor is going to give some cash up front they have to go out to a bank, get a loan, get qualified for that, pay the founder that he wants, so much down payment. And then how much is the seller going to carry back as a note? And that's a risk on then for the seller, right? Because the seller's left, he gets out of the day-to-day business, he's not hyper involved. And if things start going the other direction and that advisor that took over is not running the business appropriately and it's, it's not growing like they thought, that becomes a massive friction point. And we've seen this where the owner has to come back and try to reinsert themselves.
There are studies about this that have been written by other M&A experts that talk about that specifically. The seller can't really walk away, right? They've got to stay involved. They stay there longer than they anticipated, or oftentimes the other employees within the firm this is a huge shock to them, right? So you have the second gen who says, hey, I'm buying this business, but now the other employees may not particularly like the management style of the second gen.
Of the new guy,
right?
that comes.
Because that person was a counterpart during the process.
And then they've been elevated now.
Right. Now the expectations change, and it could be, when Joe owned the firm, I didn't have to do this. And now you're expecting me to do this, right?
You're changing this now.
So things change. Yeah, things change.
So look, this is a topic that we could go on for a long time on, and I know we're going to build on these topics as we move through these series of podcasts. What I'm also excited to let everybody know, we're going to have a series of guest speakers, like Jeff Bucheister and Dan Mays will be joining us. Michael Molnar, who's part of the runs the M&A team here at Cetera, and those are going to be some great third-party individuals that come in and give their perspective on what succession planning looks like.
Right.
What are some of the metrics we're seeing? And again, in future episodes, we'll be talking about how do you improve valuations. What are some of the other alternatives for succession planning? Because if I can come full circle on this, I think a reason a lot of advisors fall into the second generation is it feels benevolent. It feels like I'm paying it forward. I'm helping this young man or young woman out into the business when I didn't have that opportunity myself, and I had to start from zero, and they can carry my legacy forward. And those are all great thoughts. But the execution of that, as we've seen, is very, very difficult to pull off for all the things we laid out.
Well,
there.
I think, and hopefully through this series, we can provide some transparency to our audience and to any potential sellers of their businesses. Because look, there is no one size fits all. There is no size 9 shoe that everyone can fit into. But transparency is important, culture is important, finding the right fit for your employees is important moving forward, right? Because you have great employees in your firm that now you're going to be selling to someone else. You do care about those employees and hope that they have some sort of opportunity moving forward with the new buyer, right? And as a buyer, you want to keep those employees because that's what's sticky
That's the
to
business.
the clients.
That is
right?
the whole business.
It's
yeah.
about people.
Yep.
It's not just about the check that we can write.
Yep.
The check is only as good as the clients who remain in the seat and the people who serve them can remain in the seat that make those clients feel comfortable about the transaction.
Yeah, I tell everybody at the retirement planning group, I used to think that the product was the plan that we did or the investment allocation or the advice. That is not the product of any firm.
Yeah.
The product of every firm are the people that make it, that are at the firm.
Well, that's what I think is exciting about your firm, the Retirement Planning Group. You're providing that vehicle to a seller who can walk away and say, wow, I've put my employees in a great spot. I've put my clients in a great spot because that is their fiduciary obligation, right? They
Yep.
promised that client, I'm going to make sure that you're in good hands if something happens to me. That same promise that they hopefully made to their employees. You provide that vehicle for them because when you do a transaction, you're keeping the footprint, you're keeping the employees, right? You're keeping the advisor or advisors if there's more than one. But the seller can feel confident that if they have a glide path of 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, you're providing that for them. They
Yep.
don't need to leave, but you're giving them that opportunity and keeping everything in place as it is. Client still walks into that same location. This isn't like you as a big box firm that's saying, I'm going to buy it,
Strip
and then
it down.
everything goes away.
Yeah, no, not at
Right?
all. Right.
The same office stays in place. The same people are still there.
Yep. I've had people challenge me. Well, I think it is our planning work that we do, or our allocations. And I said, well, imagine everybody quits tomorrow. There is no more the retirement planning groups gone. Right. So that's why it's so imperative. And we'll talk about culture in episodes to come. So look, we covered a lot of really great topics today. We've laid out a pretty good roadmap for where we're going to take this podcast. And if you're concerned even a little bit about how your clients and staff are going to be taken care of beyond your working career, or how you're going to monetize the business that you have spent blood, sweat, and tears building over the years, that's ultimately, if we're being honest with ourselves, going to help protect your family for the long run, then I'd really encourage you to subscribe to Inflection Point, where we're going to be covering everything that's related to succession and exit planning.
And maybe you'll learn something that someone else isn't telling you. I hope that we can accomplish that because you hear from so many other firms out there telling you about succession planning and exit planning. I think we're going to tell them a whole different story, Kevin.
100% agree.